Good morning, and welcome to this sanctuary, to this space that holds dear the lives of those lost to AIDS. My name is John Cunningham. I'm the CEO of the National AIDS Memorial, and it is my honor to be up here with leaders and supporters of our organization, but most importantly, individuals, entities that represent the stories of this epidemic. For the Quilt tells the stories. The Quilt tells the stories of stigma, discrimination, prejudice, loss, but it also tells the story of hope, activism, compassion, and love. We stand here in this warehouse with over 50,000 individual panels representing well over 100,000 individual lives lost. I'm here today on the 35th anniversary of the founding and creation of the Quilt to announce that on June 11th and 12th, the largest display of the AIDS Memorial Quilt in San Francisco history will take place on Robin Williams Meadow in Golden Gate Park. This will also be the largest display in over a decade since the quilt last laid upon the mall in Washington, D.C. during the 2012 International AIDS Conference. The week of June 11th and 12th, when the quilt will lay in Robin Williams Meadow in Golden Gate Park, will also represent, to the week, 35 years since the first quilt panels hung off the mayor's balcony in San Francisco's City Hall. I also stand here today flanked by quilt panels that represent lives lost in the African American and Black community. And I think it is critically important that as we move toward a day where we have zero new infections and that AIDS is in the rearview mirror, that we realize that our focus and our efforts and our work must be on communities of color, Black and brown, and other marginalized populations which do not have access to the necessary health care and treatment and prevention that other segments of our society do. The AIDS crisis pulled back the curtain on incredible injustice in our nation, both social justice and health justice. We just are coming off 2.5 years where that curtain got pulled back again and again. We saw much of the same that played out in the AIDS crisis, where stigma, discrimination, and marginalization can adversely impact society when it's applied to public health. Because I think it's critically important that we all remember, in the term public health, the key word is public. We have a responsibility to each other, we have a responsibility to our society, and we have a responsibility to ourselves to ensure that we take the steps necessary. As a man living with an HIV and AIDS diagnosis for over 2 decades, I know what it means to suppress the virus in my own body. But it's also important that we suppress the virus in our communities, because that's how it works. We must bring the virus down in the communities that we live through testing, care, and treatment. 3 years ago in 2019, we completed the transfer of stewardship of this iconic national treasure, the largest community arts project ever created on Earth, where we stand today. When I was approached and asked the question, would I consider supporting the transfer of the AIDS Memorial Quilt from the Names Project Foundation to the National AIDS Memorial, I said yes, because these two projects, created within years of each other, just miles from each other in San Francisco, represent the best in humanity. These two memorial projects must continue to do their work. As I like to use the term, these two projects parted ways in their adolescence and went about their business, doing work in different parts of the country, and have come back together in their adult to continue that work. That transition and that support and that part of that story would not have been made possible were it not for the selfless and strategic forward-thinking vision of the leadership, the associates, the board, and all those that make up Gilead Sciences. For looking at the need for these stories to be preserved, but also to continue to be presented, was an act of support that this organization needed in order to preserve this national treasure. Over the last number of years, we've worked so hard with Gilead to not only bring the quilt home, but Gilead will be the presenting partner for the display in Golden Gate Park. It is my great honor to introduce to you today Alex Kalamparis, who is the Senior Vice President of Community Affairs for Gilead Sciences. Alex?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you. It's an honor for me, John, to be here and actually amongst these giants of the movement. I'm a little overwhelmed, I have to say. It's the first time I've walked into this room, and seeing the quilts is very emotional. But I just want to say, representing Gilead Sciences, we're very proud to be your partners. We'll be your partners for as long as you'll have us. In a way, we're celebrating the 35th anniversary. It's Gilead Sciences' 35th anniversary this year. So our histories have been running in parallel to some degree, and I do feel proud to work for a company that has had a strong contribution to turn what was a death sentence to actually a lifelong managed condition. But with that said, that's not for everyone. If that was true for everyone, unfortunately, we wouldn't have the panels that you see behind us. There is no scientific or medical reason that someone should die of an AIDS-related illness at this day and age. The reasons why we still are adding panels, sadly, are to do with stigma, racism, homophobia, poverty. There are all these other reasons outside the scientific field that we need to address. As Gilead Sciences, we know we don't have the answers to those very complex challenges, but one thing we're very good at is seeing when we see someone that can do something about it, that's passionate, that is a strong partner, that can fight this battle with these complex issues, we know our role is to enable them and support them, and that's why we're here. We're here to support all of the work you're doing. Now, one thing that's shocking, I'm moving here from London. What shocked me, one statistic, is that Black Americans make 12% of the population in the US, but Black Americans also make 43% of new infections. Those numbers don't add up. They don't make sense. They mean something is broken, and it's really on all of us to do what we can to improve what those numbers mean. And behind those numbers, as John said, there are people, there are faces, there are heroes like Juanita that we've just heard her story. I'll stop here, but I'll just want to say I'm here representing my organization, but I'm also here as a gay man in my late 40s, which means I was living in London in the late 80s as an 18-year-old gay boy that moved to London from Athens to go to university. And it was an incredible time. It was very fun. But at the same time, a year after moving to London, I had gone to 12 funerals in 12 months. No 18-year-old should have to go to 12 funerals and bury 12 friends that were of similar age. So for me, it's personal, and I really understand the power of the quilt and how important it is both to be a reminder, but also to educate the next generation. So we're here for a long time. If you'll have us as a partner, we'll be here for you. Thank you. I'm handing over to Marvin, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah, yep.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. It is now my honor to introduce Reverend Marvin White from Gilead. We lost a hero last year as well in the form of Janice Mirikitani, who was with Reverend Cecil Williams, helped to found and create Gilead, nearly 45 years?
Yeah.
45 years ago. I myself, through my journey, found great support and nurturing at Gilead. through the work that they do, impacting those in the Tenderloin and beyond. Glide is certainly an anchor within San Francisco relative to providing the necessary support systems, not only around health and medical, but job training, all the myriad of programs. We're also so honored to have Glide as a partner. Last year, when worship was taking place virtually, Marvin reached out and said we would love to hang Quilt behind me during the virtual service, and so we did. And then during the month after Janice was lost, they hung a number of the Call My Name panels that had been recently created. So Glide is a great partner. Glide is a leader, and we cannot say enough about what Glide does, what you do, Marvin. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Marvin. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And basically, John said everything I was going to say, so I can sit down. Cleve reminded me that Glide Memorial Church was one of just a couple churches that was open and affirming from the beginning. And, Cecil Williams, the Reverend Cecil Williams, notoriously went into the AIDS ward as a minister without a hazmat suit on. It was all about being in proximity to people. You can't heal people if you can't touch people. You can't be in community with people if you can't touch people. You can't be beloved community if you're not in proximity to people. And we're just continuing that work at Glide Memorial Church. We have people like myself. I'm 56. There are people who have been, who came out at the height of the AIDS pandemic, who have continued to live and carry these stories with them. And so we want to make sure that the stories are visible at Glide, we want to make sure that the stories are sacred. So when they're displayed in our sanctuary, any name that's visible is now sacred. But we also know that religion is a comorbidity factor for a lot of queer folks, so we want to make sure that we're in agreement that everyone is holy, every name called is sacred, and every opportunity to make and to alter these spaces and these quilts, we want to take that. So we're just really happy to be partners, to display the quilt, to call the names, to sing the names, to preach the names, to witness the names so that everybody could see that we're all connected. So thank you so much. We're so excited to be a part of this.
Thank you, Marvin. It's now my honor to introduce two individuals that are two of my greatest heroes, as well as I would call them great friends now. Two of the founders of the AIDS Memorial Quilt. Mike Smith is not with us today. He's on the East Coast, but we're so honored to have Cleve Jones and Gert McMullen, two of the iconic founders and creators of the quilt, to say a few words to you as well. Cleve, Gert.
You start.
You start.
Oh, no. Well, 35 years ago, I went to a meeting that he didn't go to because he said it was going to be a failure anyway. That was the first meeting of this quilt. And I brought two panels in, one for Roger Lyon and the other for David Calgaro. And then I met him a few weeks later. And he started it.
She sewed it. When I hitchhiked up to San Francisco, the first time I was 17, and I was on the street. I was homeless, and even then, Glide was a refuge for queer and trans kids who'd been abandoned by their families, who'd been thrown out by their churches. They found a home in Glide. And then, as you mentioned, when the pandemic hit, we again found refuge there. So I'm very proud and grateful for your participation in this effort. I don't have a whole lot to add to what has already been said, but just relatively recently, in November of 2019, we were all gathered in Washington, D.C. at the Library of Congress to announce the return of the AIDS Memorial Quilt to San Francisco and our partnership with the Library of Congress to care for and curate the extraordinary collection that exists really solely because Gert had the foresight to save every letter and photograph, every bit of ephemera that came with the quilt panels. I kept telling her to throw that crap away, and she said, no, we're saving it. And thank God she did, because now it's an extraordinary collection that will offer future generations an amazing window into what we experienced with that pandemic. And as we were all there gathered in the Library of Congress with Speaker Pelosi and the late John Lewis, who was instrumental also in bringing the quilt home to San Francisco, in my remarks there, I said we have to preserve these memories because there are lessons. This isn't just about memorializing our loved ones. This isn't just about sentiment. It's about pandemics. And I said someday, again, we will face another pandemic, and how tragic it would be if the lessons we should have learned from HIV/AIDS were not remembered. That was November of 2019. And who knew that I would be so prescient? And who knew that we would see again the same mistakes? The diseases are very different, of course. You don't need me to tell you that. But there's just this long list of parallels, all the terrible mistakes. And among those, and probably the most appalling, is to once again see the reality of the racial disparities in outcomes. Higher infection rates, higher hospitalization rates, higher death rates. So apparently, we didn't learn that much from HIV/AIDS. And that has been one of the more difficult parts of all of our experiences for this last couple of years. So thank you to Gilead. Thank you so much for Glide. And thank you all for coming.
And I want to say something on, because I'm surprised he didn't say something. The quilt, even though it's a memorial, it was not started out that way. It started out out of anger and activism. And that's why I'm still here today. I know that's why he's still here today, because we're angry. And nobody should have to die the way our friends died.
Thank you.
Thank you both. As has been said by every single speaker, I think it's really important that we take a moment and just resonate on the fact that each of us have addressed the disparities that occur in Black and brown communities. It's an injustice, and it is something that we as a society in America must face and deal with and solve. As has been discussed also, the Quilt years ago began a program called the Call My Name Project to focus on that community, to ensure that those lives lost that weren't remembered for various reasons had the opportunity to finally have their names called. So I'm going to turn this over to Jada Harris and to Dwayne Kramer, who are going to talk a little bit about Call My Name and about the work that goes on, as well as the work that will be going on in the future. And lastly, I want anybody that is available and would like to become involved in our project for June 11th and 12th. There's incredible opportunities to volunteer and to become engaged. So again, thank you, and now I'll turn it over to Jada and Dwayne.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today. My name is Dwayne Kramer. I am the Director of the Community Engagement for the Quilt. And just echoing a lot of what's been said, we've all been touched, all of us, by the HIV and AIDS epidemic. I lost my best friend 36 years ago to HIV/AIDS. My best friend was my father. 10 years later, I tested HIV positive. And from that moment on, I've really dedicated my life to doing what I can to bring an end to HIV and AIDS. And there's no greater tool that I believe than the National AIDS Memorial Quilt to do the work that needs to be continued. We have a program called Call My Name, which is laser focused on communities of color with an emphasis on the African American community. And we've talked about statistics around HIV and AIDS. And the simple fact is HIV and AIDS rates in the Black community are actually rising. And that's unacceptable, and quite frankly, I'm mad about it. And I'm here with the Quilt to make sure that with laser-like focus, we use this tool to bring an end to HIV/AIDS. And it's going to be through the Calm My Name program, which we're going to bolster the program and really continue to make sure that everyone understands that there are these disparities, which have existed from the beginning. HIV and AIDS has always impacted communities of colors from day one. We weren't talked about, however, we were always those that were greatest impacted. And so it's important that we let people know that today, and we use all of our power and all of the people, this amazing team of people here at the AIDS Memorial and our partners, to have the conversations that haven't been had and to do the work that needs to continue. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the program manager for the Call My Name program, Jada Harris.
Thank you.
Well, like I said, my name is Jada Harris. I'm actually a native Oaklander. So I'm back home here, and as Dwayne was talking, then, you know, my emotions started to well up because my best friend made his transition over 25 years ago from HIV, and my god sister also. And when I became part of the Quilt, I didn't know that there was a place for me to put my grief and to put the lives of my friends and my family somewhere so that they could live on and do the work. And when we talk about the work, we talk about people looking at these panels and seeing themselves and saying, this should not happen. I should not be on this quilt. Most of these people on this quilt were cut down in the prime of their lives. And to think about what we have lost as a community from their gifts is astounding. And the Call My Name program in particular gives voice to people like me who have lost people and didn't have a place to put those feelings, those grief. We hear all about the numbers, the statistics, and how HIV and AIDS is ravaging in the Black community, but we don't see it. They're just numbers. This puts a face to those numbers. These are people, dynamic people in our community that were worthy and that we have lost as a community for them not being here and being able to contribute. And like Dwayne said, that, you know, health disparities in the Black community is nothing new. And a lot of times the narrative about African Americans and HIV gets pushed on the lack of support from the Black church and religious communities. I don't find that to be true. Matter of fact, I know it isn't true. The African American panels that we have, we wouldn't have if it wasn't for the Black churches opening their doors, because it's little old ladies in church basements that are memorializing their husbands, their sons, their daughters, their uncles, their loved ones. Quilting is an African American experience. It's something that we do as a community naturally. So we make sure that we make a tie with the religious communities, spiritual communities, Black church communities, and we say to them, your pews are empty because they aren't there. And this gives an opportunity to show the world that these people were worthy, and this is a health crisis, and it should be treated as such. Because when they're gone, we all lose. You know, and I think about the power of the workshops that we do and Call My Name. Like Dwayne said, it's laser focused on increasing the participation of African Americans, but it's for everybody. We want to call everyone's name. There's a place for everyone. There's no one in our world that is not represented on this quilt. And the power that happens in the workshop, we call it kind of quilt magic that happens. Because people will sit around a table with needle and thread or paint brushes, people who have never sewn anything in their lives. And over a course of a few hours, they begin to expose the most deepest, intimate experiences of their lives. And it just happens because we are a people of community. And the healing that takes place in that process is something that is immeasurable. I'm looking at the panel on the far right at the bottom there for Valerie Moore, who made her transition last year in Atlanta. And there are pictures of her family on there. There's a picture of them signing her panel. And I listened to the healing that took place just from them gathering as a family. So this stretches just beyond just activism. There's healing in this quilt. When Cleve and his friends founded this organization and they decided to sew together these quilt panels, it was as if, how can you reject something so warm and fuzzy? You know? I don't know how they had the foresight to be able to know that this is a tool that everyone can embrace. And we want to be able to one day put that last one panel on the quilt. And we know that programs like Call My Name will give an opportunity for everybody to come in to the kitchen, sitting around the table, sharing their stories and remembrance, and knowing that there's no reason for anyone else to be on this quilt. And if they do make their transition because of HIV and AIDS, we will care for them. Because that's what the quilt is. We're the caretakers of this quilt. The AIDS Memorial doesn't own the quilt. They are the caretakers of this quilt. And they make sure that their lives, these thousands of lives, tell stories about humanity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow. Look, Jada, Dwayne, thank you. Jada, thank you for your spirit. You know, as I wrap up, I want to do a call to action. To anybody that sees this, anybody that's viewing this, it's about getting connected to, as Jada said, the quilt magic. We want to have as many quilt panels sewn and brought to June 11th and 12th as you can do. Bring your family, your loved ones, those that are connected to a life that's been lost around your kitchen table. You can visit and learn more not only about June 11th and 12th, but about panel making by visiting our website at aidsmemorial.org. On that website, there's a dedicated page to June 11th and 12th to this particular momentous project. As Jada said, we're just the caretakers. There are too many names here, and there are too many names that aren't here. But we are committed as an organization and as a community to ensure that we remember the lives. Because, and when you look at these panels, they tell the story of a life lost, but they also showcase the love that enveloped that life. Thank you so much for all what you're doing. And again, I cannot express our deepest gratitude any greater to Gilead Sciences for helping to support not only bringing the quilt back to its place of origin in the Bay Area, but to support June 11th and June 12th. So thank you again, Gilead. Thank all of you for being here, and we'll see you on June 11th and 12th in Golden Gate Park.